hear the word finance, what's the first thought that crosses your mind? If you're like 99% of people or entrepreneurs, the thought of having to look at or deal with your numbers brings fear or dread. Let's be honest, finance has never been a sexy topic. Most hate having to deal with or even talk about their numbers or finances because they're often viewed as scary, confusing, confronting, or just plain boring as batshit. Here's the thing. Finance doesn't have to be overwhelming or intimidating, and it can actually be quite a fun and stimulating topic because making money, becoming more successful, and creating more wealth is vital if you want to build a thriving and sustainable business and/or provide a strong financial foundation for your family. I created Financial Foreplay back in 2009 as a way to demystify finance, and I've been using my proprietary methodologies and strategies based on science to make complex financial concepts accessible to everyone. I want to give you the knowledge you need in order to become even more successful at growing your business or building real wealth for your family. And I'm also going to introduce you to some global experts so that you can learn from the best. And we're going to be speaking with some trailblazing individuals and entrepreneurs so you can really benefit from their stories, challenges, and triumphs. Financial Foreplay is a registered trademark, which is why there is only one Financial Foreplay, and you should only ever strive and settle for the best. It's time to slip into something a little bit more comfortable, because we're about to dive in and begin.
Can you keep my secret?
Moist. It's one of those words that produces intense reaction in people. The word moist can trigger a whole range of powerful and primitive reactions: arousal, disgust, aversion, nervousness, shame, and yes, even the giggles. And this is true for both the person who says it and also for those who have to hear it. Strangely enough, it's not the only M word in the English language that can activate a potent and primitive response. The only other M word that I've ever seen create such a formidable response is, of course, the most taboo subject of all: money. Humans have many different ideas and thoughts and beliefs about money. And some of the more common debilitating ones include, you need to have money to make money. I'm not good with numbers and money. It's hard to make money in my industry. Or finance and numbers are way too complicated. These limiting beliefs severely curtail your potential because your subconscious mind is programmed to automatically deliver results that mirror back who you are and what you believe to be true, regardless of whether it's real or imagined. When you boil it down, though, the discomfort that people experience when this topic of money is broached really stems from one or two very dark places: the fear of judgment or the fear of being exploited. Basically, for those of you who've got limited resources, guess what? You may worry that others are going to look down upon you in terms of your intelligence, your work ethic, or perhaps just your ability to manage money. And for those of you who got plenty of cash, you probably want to hang on to as much of it as you can and not be taken advantage of. Either way, the frames or the limiting beliefs that you're currently using to look at and define money, they may not be affording you with the best opportunity for success. Today, I want to explore, with the help of our guest, how this plays out in real life and maybe how this might be playing out in your life. As a first step to sort of understanding how you can use different techniques to move past these obstacles to discover more empowering resources and enhance financial opportunities. Our guest is Martin Bissett. He's a good friend of mine, and he's the founder of the Upward Spiral Partnership in the UK, which specializes in enabling accountants to win higher-end clients, create leaders from their ranks, and save people from financial ruin, which is a great mission. His reason for being is to focus on accountants, or just to focus accountants on the profound outcomes that their advisory expertise can really create in the lives of their clients. At the same time, he also alerts accountants to the profound difficulties that can arise in the lives of their clients when they choose not to help clients cure the financial, personal, and strategic pain points that are keeping them up at night. I'm so excited to have you here, and I can't wait to hear what you're going to share with our listeners, Martin.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Martin, before we get stuck into some really interesting client stories, because you've always got the best stories, could you please do me a huge favor and explain to our listeners how you came to be doing what you're doing right now and a little bit more about your motivation?
Sure, yeah. The answer is by fluke, by complete chance. What happened originally that got me into this was my father's experience. I was in computer software. And in computer software, I had watched it go from it being licensed to print money through to being an ethic-free environment where competition was so strong that you would have to sell your grandma to sell a box. And I wasn't well suited and well cut out for that situation. So I was trying to work out what it was that I wanted to do. And I was sat in my office staring at the wall and I said, right, what do I want to do? Okay, I want to help people. Okay, all right, now how do I help people and make money at the same time? Ooh, consultancy. Okay, consultancy. I'm going to become a consultant. What do I know about consultancy? Absolutely nothing. Okay, so there's my starting point. And I, back in those days, there were things called CD-ROMs. Google it, kids. And I was looking at, I think you were right with grandma first time. So I looked at management consultancies in the town where I was from. I was working outside of that town at that time. I wanted to go back home. And I picked up the phone and I said, hi, I'd like to speak to the managing director, please, which is the UK version of a CEO. And the person on the end of the phone said, what's the call regarding? And I said, the call is regarding employment. And they said, is this about the vacant marketing manager's position? I said, it is now. And that was the fluke. That was how it started. And I got the opportunity to interview for an organization who were just starting the process of working with accountants. So we really got in at the early stages. This is just when regulatory and legislative changes were allowing professional services to proactively market their services and let people know what they were actually about. And that started the process. So that is where it stayed. And that was this is nearly 23 years ago, Rondalyn. And the reason why I'm still doing that is because I learned very quickly the answer to a childhood conundrum. And that was that I was born into somewhere between a lower middle class and a middle class household. So my earliest memories are of relative comfort, but my more acute memories are of difficulty and upset in the home and constant turmoil and having a father who used to come home and play board games to come home and not want to talk to you. To go through a lot more bottles of alcohol than he used to. And the mood just changed and the vibe changed and it was tense all of a sudden. And as a kid, I had no idea what was going on. But in later life, I learned that he had gone from being successful to being deeply unsuccessful. And the change had been caused by his success. Wait a minute, that's a contradiction. What had happened is that he had got too successful. In other words, he had been able to build his business beyond his own ability to run it. He was not financially literate. He was not fully educated in even the basics, P&Ls and balance sheets and so on. And there was no help. Back in those days, the accounting profession were both unable and sometimes prohibited from advising clients proactively and actually, as they used to call it, touting their services. So there was no help for the owner-managed business. And for those who were doing well but didn't quite know why they were doing well, it all went very wrong. And that was the problem right there. And what happened was that the business spiraled out of control financially. Very poor decisions were made. And that led to my father, first of all, losing his success, then losing his business, then losing his self-esteem, then picking up a very strong ability to drink, then the marriage falling apart, and ultimately him taking his life a number of years ago. So when I was in a situation where I could actually find out what the power was behind a professional advisor to not just save a business, but to accelerate it, that's when I became very engaged in this work. And I found that due to many issues, accountants struggle to do that. So it was my job to empower the accountants so that they could bring financial peace of mind to the business owner, so that we had safe and stable homes. And we didn't have kids going to school with knots in the stomach because mum and dad had been arguing over the breakfast table over money that neither of them understood.
So in your experience, because you've seen this both firsthand, going through your father going through what he went through, why do small business owners find this stuff, money, so difficult to talk about?
I think it changes from culture to culture. In the UK, for example, it's a cultural thing. We don't talk about money. In the US, you find people talking very openly about their situations. Hey, I've just got this situation, and I've got $2,000 here, and I need to do this, and I need to... And you see them being very open because the culture is different. They want to know how to succeed. And we, in the UK, we have it as a taboo. Even to this day, we have it as a taboo. You don't talk openly about your personal circumstances. You don't tell anybody what's in your bank account. You don't disclose personal financial information to friends or relatives or strangers, especially not relatives. And so, we don't. So it's a culture of not talking about it. And when you've got a taboo that isn't explored, then you have an unknown. Where you have an unknown, you have a fear. And I used to think that business owners, the major cause of business failure, a small business failure, was undercapitalization. And as I have led my life in consulting, I found it's nothing to do with undercapitalization. Undercapitalization is a product of a lack of self-esteem. We don't actually believe in our own stuff. We don't actually have the guts and wherewithal to reach out to people and create commercial opportunities for ourselves. If you can solve the self-esteem issue, you can often solve, in fact, you can almost always solve the undercapitalization issue. And that for me is the big reveal, that it comes from the heart. It is not, the market conditions weren't favorable, or the competition was too tough, the price bottom was knocked out of the market. All of these things, of course, are contributory, but they're generally symptoms as opposed to root causes. And if we go back to root causes, it's generally that the business itself hasn't been well enough thought through, or we didn't have enough confidence in it, or we didn't have enough confidence in ourselves. And if I had to pick a number one, that last one would be my number one.
Yeah, so it's a mindset thing. So I like to call it chronic poverty mindset. And I think, the not feeling worth it is one component, I guess, of chronic poverty, or even some people, I've heard them call it stinking thinking.
I think it was Zig Ziglar that said, no stinking thinking in life. And I think that's one of his mantras. But don't forget, also, again, from the UK perspective, less so from a US perspective, but in the UK, we're not taught money in schools either. So we leave school knowing mathematics, knowing algebra and trigonometry, but not knowing how to do a budget, a household budget.
Well, hey, the kids are educated here in Australia the same way. They, will do great in parallelogram season, but they won't be able to do their own tax return, right?
Right, exactly.
So I think we need to rethink the way that we broach the subject of money and finances with kids. I can't see a reason why we could not be teaching cash flow and these basic concepts to kids in primary and secondary school.
I had the pleasure of listening to evidence given by a select committee in Parliament. Here in the UK, I was able to be part of what's known as an APPG, which is an all-party parliamentary group on young money and on poverty. And the finding that has stayed with me from all the research, that was the evidence was given by governmental departments, was given by charities, was given by banks, all kinds of evidence. And the one that really struck out at me is that if you want an adult to be financially literate in their 30s, you need to start teaching them when they're 9. And that was a formula worked out based on how long it takes for these habits to take hold, how long life experiences take to unravel financially, and all these different contributory factors towards why 9, why not 8, why not 7.5? And based on comprehension, ability to understand, based on life circumstance in life, 30, I think it was 34 was the figure. If you want somebody to be fully financially literate in terms of household finances and business finances at that time, start teaching them when they're 9. And that would make it part of the primary school curriculum, which of course it's not.
Fair enough. And we all know that it's not that hard to teach kids this stuff because they're actually pretty bright. And you don't have to use math and accounting to teach people these basic skills. They can be taught through pictures and stories. I'm always up there using puppets and different types of ways to bring these concepts to life, but they can easily be taught to children.
Earliest learning tool known to man is the parable, where imagery and metaphor and simile were used in order to create ideas and pictures in people's minds. Great legends and myths and so on have been used as long as we have recorded history to educate the mind of the human. So you're absolutely right. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be a dry lesson. It could be moist. But of course, if we're talking about 9-year-olds, then what do they want? They want to go on an adventure. They want to be captivated. And they want to have their imagination lighted. And can you do that on this subject? Of course you can.
Yeah, it's like this is on a different train, but I'm sure you're aware that there is a hospital in America that the kids were going there for cancer treatments and different things, and they didn't want to go into the MRI machine. So they actually dressed the entire machine up as a pirate ship. And they all of the doctors and nurses dressed up as characters that would be, seen in and around a pirate ship. And they made the environment an adventure for the kids. And it totally transformed their ability to get good diagnostics with these kids because they were much more relaxed because of the environment.
Absolutely right. What was once scary becomes an adventure. And I've seen financial literacy for children dressed up as a board game, dressed up as a series of storybooks where a central character goes through the same challenges as they go through, and they identify with this character and want to emulate this character, and therefore have grasped the basic concepts without anybody mentioning mathematics once.
Yeah, look, it's absolutely fascinating. We're going to have to work together, you and I, on some kind of project towards this. Deal.
Let's do it.
You and I both know that cash flow and capitalization, so working capital, it's an issue, and it's been an issue for decades and decades. But do you think that COVID has been, for lack of some better phrase, the perfect storm that's really forced these crucial conversations to the forefront for folks, both in terms of the business stuff that they're going through or even just building wealth for their family and investing?
Yes and no. I wouldn't give a general answer to say yes it has and no it hasn't. I see pockets here. When our first lockdown happened in the UK, which was March of 2020, the first story I was told by a client of mine was of a restaurateur who had suffered any number of business setbacks in the recent past, some of his own making and some of market conditions. And when he saw this was just one too many for him. And unfortunately, he chose to leave rather than to stay in life. And that was the first COVID casualty that I ever heard about, was a restaurateur in London who chose not to try and battle through, but to simply check out. It was time to go. And he left this earth at that time, causing untold pain for his loved ones. So no, it didn't automatically create the perfect storm. For some, it was too stormy, far too stormy, and they couldn't handle it. And of course, we've seen many businesses now go to the wall. Thankfully, not the people, not the ownership, but the businesses have gone to the wall because, quite simply, it's too much to handle. But then, on the other hand, yes. The other thing I've seen is I have seen my world, accounting firms having their doors knocked down with business owners requesting the very advice that people like me have been asking accountants to give to business owners for 20 odd years now. And it was business owners coming to the fore and saying, I need to know where I'm at the bank. I need to understand where I'm going to be in 9 months from now if things don't change. I need to understand. And so on and so on and so on. And all this requirement all of a sudden showed up. All of a sudden now we've got I want to know. I want to be in control of my future. I want to be able to forecast. I want that crystal ball for my business. All of a sudden these things started happening. So yes, in that regard, I really did see it come. My fear is that the accounting profession will return to being deadline chasers when all this is over. And too many of them won't have grasped that this is their true nature of their calling, that this is the most noble iteration of their professional qualification, to bring financial peace of mind and to bring the aspirations to reality in the minds and lives of these business owners. I mean, what an incredible legacy to leave, to be able to use your skill set, professional skill set, to bring about the dream home, or to bring about the 4-day week, or to bring about the more time with the family, or whatever the goals are of the individual. You know, how incredible to be the one who becomes a without whom, like at the award ceremony when you say, thanks very much for this award, I'd like to dedicate it to XYZ, without whom none of this would have been possible. To be without whom in someone's life, imagine that. That would be incredible.
Would you be willing to share a couple of real life examples of clients that have come forward to talk about something that perhaps they might have been unwilling or maybe even unable to talk about with anyone before COVID happened?
Definitely. Yes, absolutely. I'll stay local first of all. So I think one of the first ones I heard about locally here was a very well-known business in the local area. And they produce confectionery, sweet treats kind of thing. And because they are at the center of the community as a human being as well, you automatically assume that they're okay. So the shop looked like it was always booming. The person is always in the middle of community projects, a pillar of the community. So you always assume that everything's fine. And the reality was not that. The reality was that there was behind the scenes an uncontrolled spending habit. And I won't say what, because that would give away as to who I'm talking about here. But the point is that there was no control whatsoever. So there was no budget in the home. Okay. There was no investment strategy, because as we know, absolute basics, you spend less than you earn and you invest the rest. And that hadn't happened either. And there was this uncontrolled spending habit. And what was happening is the business owner was taking drawings out of the business in both salary and dividends on, let's call it a Friday afternoon. And in fact, that's quite literal. And by Saturday morning, the money was gone. Okay. And there were different stories being made up by this individual as to where this money was magically disappearing to in a 24-hour or less period. And of course, the real reason was not disclosed. And it took a question out of nowhere, a seemingly innocuous question, to unlock them. And that question was about, for a business that does so well or looks to be doing so well, why are you in this situation here? Why is that showing why do you have this issue on your credit score? Why is that person knocking on your door? Why is this happening? And all of a sudden, the floodgates just opened and years of confession came out. And why were they doing that? Well, that's a story for a different time as to why they were doing that. But let's just say, and the important thing for listeners to understand is that this was going on in isolation and there was nowhere for this person to turn. And it took a professional to be proactive and actually reach out and ask the questions to find out that the business owner had been dying to be asked these the whole time because they were out of control. They could not stop what they were doing and they wanted to stop and they wanted someone to make them stop or at the very least help them stop. And it took the professional to be proactive to make that happen. So what happened was that they confessed all to the accountant. A little pact was made between accountant and client as to this was going to be kept under wraps and some corrective measures were going to be put in place, starting with a verbal agreement, not a technical piece of work, but a verbal agreement. And the verbal agreement was, this is not going to happen again. You like yourself too much to allow this to happen. You love your family too much to allow this to happen ever again. So interestingly, the professional asked the client to make a spiritual commitment. That this is not who you are, this is not what you stand for, this is not what you want, and this is not who you want to be remembered as. So we're going to change it. And once again, we're back to mindset there, Randall, but once the person said, that's right, that's not who I am, it's not who I want to be. Once that was done, we got ourselves a little bit of self-esteem. And then we could start putting processes in place. And it was the most basic processes. A household budget, a business budget, a tax account to make a provision for tax, a ratio set up and agreed as to what happened to all income and in what percentages it was going to be split up amongst various different pots. This much for operations, this much for drawings, this much for tax, this much for reserve, and so on and so on and so on it went. And all of these things. And what you saw was a public veneer being replaced by a personal peace. And so this person who was the sort of, center point of the community, they went from being outwardly very, very vivacious and outgoing to being actually just quite at peace with themselves. And that same intensity had gone away. They weren't trying quite so hard to convince you that they were doing well anymore. And it had been replaced with this comfort, contentment, and just assurance that things were all right. And when you get that, I think it allows you to be far more giving and useful to others, because that silent panic inside has gone away. And all of a sudden, you love yourself a lot more. And when you love yourself a lot more, you are able to be of more use to other people. And it all came, Rundlin, the whole thing came from somebody caring enough to say, wait a minute, the public profile is inconsistent with the private picture. What's going on? That's all it took.
You know what I love about that story is it really brings to the forefront the thing that, we know is true. It's not just about the numbers. You can look at these things and see them as numbers, and therefore it's natural to kind of try to attack it from a numbers perspective. Let's throw some dashboards and KPIs and stuff at it. But if we don't tackle these underlying causes, the root causes or symptoms of these problems, which in this case was mindset, you're never going to fix it by purely putting a financial Band-Aid on the top of it. We have to get to the bottom of what's really going on with our clients.
We always try and solve problems with process. And the problem, the issue is that most of these problems that we're describing are behavioral. And you don't fix behavior with process. You fix behavior with an appeal to the heart, and an appeal to the core of the human, an appeal to the what were you made for? What are you here for? What are you in business for? And going back to the core of the human. And that's how you change behavioral or improve behavioral traits. Well, unfortunately, the tech world keeps inventing processes instead, because it's very, very hard to change behavior. So we say just use our dashboard instead. You're quite right. But if I may I share just a second, much shorter story with you?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so let's bring it really home. We started this episode by talking about my father. Let's bring this home. I then made the same mistake in business. So if I pick up that story from after I got involved in the accounting profession, I ended up starting my own business, having been on a board of directors. On a board of directors, somebody who has to review management information every month. And I ended up running my own business, and I got myself into the same trouble as my father had. I was 72 hours from going out of business. And what I mean by that is that the bills were due in 72 hours from that point, and I didn't have sufficient business to cover them. And it was my accountant that saved me. I made a phone call from a car park, from my beaten up car in a car park overlooking the town that I grew up in, to tell my accountant it was over. The business had failed, and I had failed. And that's not, with somebody with the ego my size, that's not a very easy phone call to make. And rather than the accountant saying, well, okay, so what we'll do now is we'll put it into receivership and we'll call in didn't do that. My accountant said, nah, not prepared to accept this outcome. And then called me back and gave me some advice as to what to do. And with 24 hours to go, exactly 24. I know it's a convenient number, but it's literally with 24 hours to go, close of business one day to close of business the next day. I got a breakthrough, which was a contract, which was the exact value of my break-even position, which is why I priced it that way. And it's all of a sudden the confidence came flowing back. All of a sudden, an external signature on a piece of paper made me believe in myself because I was learning that somebody else had chosen to believe in me to the tune of X number of thousands of pounds. And all of a sudden, I was like, oh, I get it. And the immediate danger was averted, but not the long term. So then the accountant went further and said, right, to stop this from ever happening again, here's what we're going to do. And then walked me through. But it wasn't the processes, because I could have Googled those, I could have read a book about those. It wasn't the processes that saved me. It was the arm around the shoulder that saved me. And what I have now, which is a business that is now global, has come about because somebody cared enough to say, I'm not prepared to accept your defeat, even if you are. And that's what changed it.
You know, Martin, I really, not only do I have huge respect for you and consider you a great friend, I just want to say thank you so much for your willingness to really be open and vulnerable in this session, because I know that, you've given the listeners so much gold and stuff that you've said, both personally and stuff just about your clients. I think that we all just need to take a step back from this thing and remember that what you're saying is totally accurate. This isn't about numbers and processes. This is about talking to people about the stuff that's keeping them up at night. It's about connecting. Someone once said, and I thought this was a really very astute observation, that the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. And I think that's really
yes.
That's what we're really talking about here. If you want, this guy, I thought it was fascinating that this guy that you were talking about had a confectionery, and people get addicted to lollies and sweets, right?
Right.
He was addicted to spending. So it's an addiction. Spending money, not saving, all these things are habits, they're addictions. And the opposite isn't, putting some systems in place. It's connection, and it's connecting to the heart. And it's about teaching accountants to do that. Now, not everybody on this podcast with us today is going to necessarily be an accountant or a bookkeeper. But I just want to make sure that regardless of whether they're small business owners or they are accountants and bookkeepers, that they know how to reach out and get in contact with you. And so I just want you to tell the listeners quickly just a little bit about your business and how they can reach out if they want to speak to you.
Certainly. Well, the overriding business is called the Bissett Group, which owns or co-owns several assets now that serve the accounting profession. And the easiest starting point is either bissettgroup.com, BISSETT, or simply to find me on LinkedIn, Martin Bissett, BISSETT, and connect from there. And let's just start the conversation. It doesn't matter what the conversation is about, or whether you have a need right now, or whether there's a need that I can't fix. I'll know somebody who can. And let's just start there and have the conversation, because my mission is to bring financial peace of mind to the business owner, just like I needed, just like my dad needed, via the accountant, because they're the one who can do it. But if there are listeners here that are business owners, and business owners that have the basis of a really good business, but are somehow not seeing it in the bottom line or in the bank account, it's time to either reach out to your current accountant or reach out to a different accountant and say, hey, I think I should be doing a lot better than I am. What am I missing? And watch out for the one who puts the arm around the shoulder. They are gold. And they're the one who will be an asset to your business for years to come. Write them into your strategic plan for years to come.
Well, I admire you greatly, and I'm so proud of you for sharing all this stuff. And I'm very, very thankful. I can't wait till we can have an opportunity to speak again.
Thank you for the opportunity. I very much appreciate it.